all of you who are listening and who are looking at our videos. Today we are talking again to Jacqui of the Pink Ladies Organization for Missing Kids. As you know, it's a charity, it is registered, it's been going for many years, and you're welcome to assist them as much as you can. Jax, I'm wondering here, what happens if you have to waste resources to find somebody, to find a child, and it turns out that the child perhaps has not been adopted as such, but just ran away from home. And I'm not saying it's not a bad thing to run away from home. I just know that you people have very limited funding and you have very limited time as well, because once you get stuck into a case, you are all like very busy with it. So I just want to know, is it possible that your money or your resources rather can be wasted on chasing after things which are not perhaps as serious? And would that affect your business then? Your business of finding missing kids? I know you don't do it for profit, you're doing this, to help.
Good afternoon or good evening to all of our listeners, wherever you are and whatever time it is in your zone. One of the questions that we're often asked is, are there any consequences for wasting resources, especially when organizations such as ourselves go all out to find teens, and especially since we're limited in our resources. The immediate answer here would be an absolute no. One has to remember that when somebody is out there and they're missing, they have placed themselves in a vulnerable position. But as we would also not blame somebody who develops cancer and deny them treatment just because they were a smoker or exposed themselves to something like that, the same would apply in this case. The moment somebody is out on the street, they are desperately more vulnerable than they would have been in a safe environment. And in particular in cases with children. Children aren't always fully aware of the dangers out there. And unfortunately, being out there does place them in a much more vulnerable position. Yes, it does weigh very heavily on our resources and obviously on other people's resources as well. And the amount of psychological stress and worry that is created is concerning. But as I've said in many of my other talks that I've given, children essentially are creatures of habit. For them to stray out of a safe, protected and comfortable environment, there has to be either an outside factor that has lured them away, or something that is happening within the home itself that has caused this to happen or caused them to stray away from the home. One has to always look at the big picture and try not to make rash judgments on what little you see in the media. We have noticed that many people who comment on our flyers will say things like, damn naughty child, just give them a hiding and send them home, or what a waste of time. But one has to remember, as I've said, that when a child is out there and they're vulnerable and they are in harm's way, sending them back home, giving them a hiding and sending them back home is completely counterproductive. You have to find out what the root cause is here. And if the child comes from an environment where they are being abused, or there is alcohol abuse or drug abuse in the home, and they're trying to get away from a desperate situation, you'd be doing them an incredible disservice by sending them back without investigation. Obviously, this is also where police trauma counsellors would be involved, and depending on the age of the child, a social worker would be brought in to assess the situation and find out if there's not a deeper root cause for what has happened.
Okay, that's interesting. I understand now. But I have the same question. What happens if a police service for some reason start wasting their resources? How would you think about that?
When it comes to the question of are there consequences for wasting of police resources, obviously this is a much more complicated answer. One has to look at the reasons what has happened to put this runaway or even an adult person in this situation. Where it is a blatant waste of resources, one could look at a case perhaps where a gentleman has financial obligations or has gotten himself into financial trouble, runs away, hides out, and then perhaps even goes as far as to fake his own death, which has happened. We have been involved in such cases. Then obviously the police are completely entitled to institute charges against him of defeating the ends of justice, because an incredible amount of resources would have been wasted in such a case. When you're dealing obviously with somebody who is perhaps suicidal and has gone off and not told anyone where they're going, or even left a note saying that they intend to commit suicide, one can hardly call that a waste of resources. The person is crying out for help, and to deny them that help and then to still charge them with a waste of resources would be completely counterproductive. And then obviously also in a case of a child, the chances of police instituting any kind of action against them for that would be very slim, unless, of course, they're a serial runaway and there's no explicable root cause, or if they're known to do this sort of thing as attention seeking, but then they wouldn't be charged as an adult, and most certainly wouldn't be locked up as an adult. Even more so, the welfare services would then play a very, very important role in assessing the entire situation. Again, if every case has to be looked at on a one-on-one basis, and one has to see the bigger picture here. None of these things happen on their own. There's always a reason for it, however difficult it may be to understand. But each case has to be looked at in a separate, with a separate view. And one has to take cognizance of all of these things.
And now, Jax, we come to a question which I think you've been asked many times. I've been asked it myself as an attorney when I was still in private practice. Is what do you do if a child runs away from home? And this child then arrives at your house, and the child is telling you a most dreadful story about what's happening there. What do you do? And can you get into trouble? You a parent of an older person who's trying to assist, was doing a good thing actually. Would there be any legal implications for you for assisting somebody who ran away?
Another question that has come up in the last couple of cases that I've dealt with, more particularly one which involved a child who had run away from home, and then made contact with her parents but refused to give details of where she was. I actually spoke to this child myself, and it turned out that there were problems at home and that this child just really needed some space and time and to spend time with people outside of the family. We can, I'm sure, all understand in our current times with being separated from your peers and friends and so on, that for a child it's even more difficult to deal with these things. In this particular case, what I advised the child was to make contact with the parent, in this case it was the mother, and to at the very least explain that she was with somebody who was safe, who was known to the family, and that she would be coming back. And to be reasonable about it. Ultimately, what turned out to be the biggest thing holding the child back from just immediately going home was that she was terrified that she would be criminally charged in some way, and that the people that had assisted her and given her a safe space for a couple of days would be charged as well. Now, obviously, in a case like this, I'm almost certain as well that the police would not charge the people that had assisted her. In this case, it was a family that was known to the child and that was known to the parent as well. And there would be no sense in charging these people. One has to also remember that the law is not fickle, and that they will not unnecessarily charge people for this sort of thing. It would be very different if it was a teen that had run away and was shacking up with her much older boyfriend, for instance. And if she was under the age of consent, there may very well be cause for charges against the older gentleman. And it would work the same with a young boy who'd run away and who was being harboured by an older woman. But intent is the important thing. Intent has to be proven at the end of the day. And provided that the child has come to no harm, that they admit that they left of their own accord and weren't coerced, there should be no reason to charge an adult who assisted them with giving them a roof over their head for a couple of days and so on. And I'd like in this instance also to appeal to people. If you have a teen that approaches you or that your child brings home with them that tells you that there's something terribly wrong going on at the home and so on, sit down and have a frank conversation with the child. Try and assist them as best you can. If you can't, try and look at other resources, school counsellors and other people in the profession who'd be well placed to give advice to the child. The last thing you want is to be harbouring a child, even more so as a parent yourself, knowing that out there's a family that is missing their loved one, that is terrified that some harm may have come to them and so on. At the very least, your immediate reaction there should be to get hold of the parent and say, I know where your child is. They are completely safe and I'm talking to them at the moment and trying to get them to contact you as well. Be very sensitive to how the parent is feeling at that given time. I'm not saying believe everything that the teenager or the child tells you, because there are times when teenagers and young children will embellish the facts and make home sound much worse than it is. And above all, just be very sensitive to the child's needs. But also do bear in mind that there are parents that do care and that are very concerned about their parents, and make that contact. Obviously, there's a lot more to be said when the child turns out to be with an older person and of an opposite sex, but that's something that we can discuss in another conversation, because in those instances, in terms of our child care legislation and the Children's Act, it becomes very important as to the age gap between the children who've run away together, whether one of them is a female, and so on. But that's something for a different conversation on a different date. But we will certainly bring that to the viewers at some point.
Thank you for listening here. As I always ask you, if it's possible for you to assist this charity, then go and do so. Everything you do or everything you can donate, even your time, that would be greatly appreciated, and it's for a good cause. And we'll speak to you again next week.